Welcome to Riders on the Roof. If you enjoy this story, leave a like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. And now, Virulentium by Bryan Anderson. Bloodied, cloth-covered fingers dug through piles of scrap metal, searching, always searching. Dark gray and tan clouds blanketed the drear sky, scattering and dimming the sunlight they glowed through. Harsh wind wailed across the barren landscape. Heaps of assorted junk, twisted metal, and long-forgotten flying vehicles littered the parched floor. The place seemed devoid of life, save for the constant shifting and scrape of metal against cloth and flesh that signaled the presence of someone moving around in the refuse. A solitary figure pushed aside a plank of rotting wood, covering the door to an ancient, dilapidated dwelling. The figure was assumed to be male, with broad shoulders and a muscular, yet lean build that his clothing could not conceal. He was dressed from head to toe in loose, sand-colored rags, with not a single centimeter of skin exposed. Huge, deeply tinted goggles covered his eyes, the only thing not wrapped in cloth or leather-like material. He stepped into what was once a hut of kinds, half the roof already caved in. He did not venture further inside, though. A single look told him that what he was looking for was not here. He backed out of the doorway, giving one last look to make sure there was nothing of use, before turning around and heading in a different direction. It would never be found in a hut. He wasn't even sure why he checked the hut in the first place. Perhaps it was his survival instinct, leading him towards something familiar. A time from his childhood when his needs and wants were met. It was a little subconscious reminder to replenish his dwindling water supply. He'd been stranded on this desolate planet for too long. His search had reached a fevered pitch, almost to the point of insanity. His search continued, following a general direction. He had to find something that could be used as a power source. Unbeknownst to him, something seemed to be reeling in his subconscious towards it. Focused once more, he pilfered the forgotten secrets of long-dead spacecrafts scattered among the towering piles of trash. He scoured through every nook it could be hiding in. All that was found was either long dead, burned, or was of a make and craftsmanship that he did not or could not understand. Given enough time, he might be able to reverse engineer one or somehow make his work with what he could scavenge, but time is what he did not have. Among other things. His stomach voiced itself in protest, and he frankly ignored it. It had been 3 days since he'd eaten last. He wouldn't last much longer here. Finally, he came to a ship that showed promise. It lay grandly and newer looking than anything else, as well as towering over its surrounding. Taking a length of metal that resembled a crowbar, he pried open a metal panel situated on the side of the spaceship. Now, with an opening just barely wide enough for him to fit, he squeezed himself through. He wriggled his way past curtains of spaghetti-like wires, intersecting pipes and a maze of circuitry. He unceremoniously emerged from the wall and into what looked to be a hallway, and threaded his crowbar onto his belt. Because it was much too dark to see anything, he pulled a short, thick rod from a pouch at his waist and flipped its switch. A dull, pale glow shone from the rod, illuminating the corridor. His sight seemed to be unaffected by the tint of his goggles in the darkness. He wandered the seemingly endless identical halls for what seemed like hours, marking his way back by scratching symbols of an unknown language and arrows into the walls, until he came to a spacious room. In the center rose a thick, cylindrical glass structure that took up half the room. He lifted his illumination rod to inspect it, his heart rate beginning to climb in anticipation. The shadows receded like a tide as he grew closer. Despite the light from the rod, an object suspended in the center of the cylinder blushed with an eerie scarlet light. He subconsciously wiped the sweat from his hands onto his legs, regardless of the bloodied rags that already wrapped his fingers and hands. He came closer until he was nearly kissing the glass. Even though the ship was powered off and dead, the trace hum of energy could be felt emanating from the object within the glass. Hooking his illumination rod onto his belt, he withdrew the crowbar. His hands were shaking as he gripped the crowbar with both hands, gazing upon the object of his obsession. Abruptly, he swung the crowbar at the glass, withholding a bit of his strength not to damage the thing of his desire. The strike caused the thick glass to crack, spiderwebbing out from the point of impact. He swung again, and then again, until the shards of glass fell, revealing a suitable opening for him to stick his hands through. Tossing the crowbar aside, he tentatively reached inside the cylinder with both arms. Heedless of the sharp glass that cut into his arms and caused blood to seep into the cloth covering them, he gingerly grasped the object in his hands and pulled it from its enclosure. The eerie crimson glow was more prominent now that it was free from its cage. The lump was slightly malleable in his hands, with the slight scent of rust drifting off of it. It looked to be a chunk of a dull red metal. Without delay, he retraced his steps, following the signs he'd left earlier. With trembling hands and light steps, he at last emerged from the belly of the beast and back into the brighter world. He hurried back towards his own crashed ship, sprinting now, the lump still clutched securely in both hands, as if afraid it would disappear if he let go, even with one hand. Arriving at his ship, a single-occupant spacecraft, an ant compared to the massive ship he'd just emerged from, he trembled uncontrollably. Moving around his ship, he located the panel that housed the power supply. Scorch marks lined the panel as if flames once erupted from within. An imperceptible pin-sized hole marred its surface. Reluctantly, he removed a hand from the lump to pull the panel free. With jittery movements, he placed the lump into position, heaving a sigh of relief after finishing securing it, when he heard the whir of electronics come to life from his ship. Finally he'd escaped this forsaken planet. Beneath the mask of cloth was a grin on his face. He went to climb into the cockpit, ready to leave. However, just before he could, he unexpectedly collapsed onto the floor. His arms and legs flailed about in every direction as his lean muscles spasmed like grotesque worms beneath his skin. As quickly as it happened, his body went deathly stiff, seizing up as if frozen. Then, millimeter by millimeter, his body relinquished control of itself, relaxing into death. Hours and then days went by. His heart had long since stopped, but an unearthly red glowing mist hovered above the now limp corpse. The body shrunk at a barely discernible rate as the red mist grew thicker. Another week went by and the mist became a thick, opaque, blood-like cloud, obscuring the morose scene beneath. As if stirred by the wind, the cloud floated from its vigil and shifted towards the ship. After its departure, the remains were revealed, scraps of cloth and leather laid out in the vague shape of a human, and a pair of thick goggles. The wind whistled by and unceremoniously carried away the trace of a life that once was, blowing the cloth into the distance, leaving only a pair of goggles behind. Then, slowly, like a low-powered vacuum sucking in cotton, the scarlet cloud was pulled into the foreign lump of metal, radiating a warm, red glow. The glow brightened as the blood-like cloud was absorbed, until the cloud was no more. Weeks passed, and the planet seemed devoid of life once more, until the roar of an engine shattered the silence. A solitary ship cruised through the skies, surveying the ground for usable scrap. Almost as soon as it appeared, a thin, scarlet beam of energy shot out from somewhere on the ground, striking the airborne ship. Erupting in flames, the hapless ship spiraled out of control until it crashed, into the dry floor. Not far off, the metal known as Virulentium glowed with anticipation. You've been listening to Virulentium, written by Bryan Anderson. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what you thought in the comments. If you'd like to have your work featured by Writers on the Roof, follow the instructions in the description below.